Hello everyone, welcome to Friday's English lesson. We're not going to do any handwriting today. I want to give you, a bit like last Friday, we're going to be doing a little bit of a longer piece of writing. So instead of spending 10 minutes doing our handwriting today, we're going to go straight into our English lesson. Okay. We've done a lot about the BFG this week. We know a lot about the BFG now. So a little bit of a warm up. We can just think these. We don't have to write these. I want you to save your hands today, because today we're going to be describing the BFG. So what I thought we'd do as a bit of a warm up is we're going to use a picture which you can see in front of you, and I want you to think of a simile about the BFG. So pause the video and just think of a simile about his hands or his nose or his eyes or his ears or the size of him. Off you go. Okay, the one I thought of was his ears. His ears are as big as bin lids. That's actually one that somebody did in their work the other day, which I liked. But you could have had his hands were as huge as tree trunks, or he has tiny little eyes like pebbles. All right, I'm not sure. Okay, next one. I want you to think of a list sentence. So that's a sentence, remember, from Wednesday's lesson that has 2, maybe 3 adjectives next to each other. Okay, so pause the video now. I want you to think of a sentence that's got 2 or 3 adjectives where you would need a comma. Off you go. Okay, one I can remember from the other day was the BFG has an old, comma, brown, leather waistcoat. The BFG has an old brown leather waistcoat. So there's my list sentence. And last one from yesterday, I want you to think of a sentence about the BFG which includes a conjunction. So as or when or if or because or after. Off you go. So the one I thought for that one was the BFG is nice to Sophie because he is a big friendly giant. So that's the one I thought of. All right, just to warm your brains up. Okay, we're going to read the next chapter of the BFG, which is called Magic Ears. You can't find it. Where are we? There we go. Marvelous ears. Sorry, not magic ears. There we go. The marvelous ears. Back in the cave, the big friendly giant sat Sophie down once again on the enormous table. Is you quite snugly in your nightie? He asked. You isn't fridgy cold? I'm fine, Sophie said. I cannot help thinking, said the BFG, about your poor mother and father. By now they must be jipping and scumping all over the house, shouting, hello, hello, where is Sophie gone? I don't have a mother and father, Sophie said. They both died when I was a baby. Oh, you poor little scrumplet, cried the BFG. Is you not missing them very badly? Not really, Sophie said, because I never knew them. You is making me sad, the BFG said, rubbing his eyes. Don't be sad, Sophie said. No one is going to be worrying too much about me. That place you took me from was the village orphanage. We're all orphans in there. You is an orphan? Yes. How many is in there? 10 of us, Sophie said. All little girls. Was you happy there? The BFG asked. I hated it, Sophie said. The woman who ran it was called Mrs. Clonkers, and if she caught you breaking any of the rules, like getting out of bed at night or not folding up your clothes, you got punished. How is you getting punished? She locked us in the dark cellar for a day and a night without anything to drink. The rotten old Rothtrasper, cried the BFG. It was horrid, Sophie said. We used to dread it. There were rats down there. We could hear them creeping about. The filthy old fizzwiggler, shouted the BFG. That is the horridest thing I is hearing for years. You is making me sadder than ever. All at once, a huge tear that would have filled a bucket rolled down one of the BFG's cheeks and fell with a splash on the floor. It made quite a puddle. Sophie watched with astonishment. What a strange and moody creature this is, she thought. One moment he is telling me my head is full of squashed flies, and the next moment his heart is melting for me because Mrs. Clonkers locks us in the cellar. The thing that worries me, Sophie said, is having to stay in this dreadful place the rest of my life. The orphanage was pretty awful, but I wouldn't have been there forever, would I? All is my fault, the BFG said. I is the one who kid-snatched you. Yet another enormous tear welled from his eye and splashed on the floor. Now I come to think of it, I won't actually be here all that long, Sophie said. I is afraid you will, the BFG said. No, I won't, Sophie said. Those brutes out there are bound to catch me sooner or later and have me for tea. I is never letting that happen, the BFG said. For a few moments, the cave was silent. Then, Sophie said, May I ask you a question? The BFG wiped the tears from his eyes with the back of his hand and gave Sophie a long, thoughtful stare. Shoot away? He asked. He said, Would you please tell me what you were doing in our village last night? Why were you poking that long trumpet thing into the Gucci children's bedroom and then blowing through it? Aha! Cried the BFG, sitting up suddenly in his chair. Now he is getting nosier than a Parker. And that suitcase you were carrying, Sophie said. What on earth was that all about? The BFG stared suspiciously at the small girl sitting cross-legged on the table. You is asking me to tell you whoopsie big secrets, he said. Secrets that nobody is ever hearing before. I won't tell a soul, Sophie said. I swear it. How could I anyway? I am stuck here for the rest of my life. You could be telling the other giants. No, I couldn't, Sophie said. You told me they would eat me up the moment they saw me. And so they would, said the BFG. You is a human being, and human beings is like strawbunkles and cream to those giants. If they are going to eat me the moment they see me, then I wouldn't have the time to tell them anything, would I? Sophie said. You wouldn't, said the BFG. Then why did you say I might? Because I is brimful of buzzburgers, the BFG said. If you listen to everything I am saying, you will be getting earache. Please tell me, what were you doing in our village? Sophie said. I promise you can trust me. Would you teach me how to make an elephant? The BFG asked. What do you mean? Sophie said. I would dearly love to have an elephant to ride on, the BFG said dreamily. I would so much like to have a big jumbly elephant and go riding through green forests picking peachy fruits off the trees all day long. This is a sizzling hot mum-frunking country we is living in. Nothing grows on it except schnozcumbers. I would love to go somewhere else and pick peachy fruits in the early morning from the back of an elephant. Sophie was quite moved by this curious statement. Perhaps one day we will get you an elephant, she said, and peachy fruits as well. Now tell me, what were you doing in our village? If you is really wanting to know what I am doing in your village, the BFG said, I is blowing a dream into the bedroom of those children. Blowing a dream, Sophie said. What do you mean? I is a dream-blowing giant, the BFG said. When all the other giants is galloping off every what way and to swallow up human beings, I is scuddling away to other places to blow dreams into the bedrooms of sleeping children. Nice dreams, lovely golden dreams, dreams that is giving the dreamers a happy time. Now, hang on a minute, Sophie said. Where do you get these dreams? I collect them, the BFG said, waving an arm towards all the rows and rows of bottles on the shelves. I has billions of them. You can't collect a dream, Sophie said. A dream isn't something you can catch hold of. You is never going to understand about it, the BFG said. That is why I is not wishing to tell you. Oh, please tell me, Sophie said. I will understand. Go on, tell me how you collect dreams. Tell me everything. The BFG settled himself comfortably in his chair and crossed his legs. Dreams, he said, is very mysterious things. They is floating around in the air like wispy, misty bubbles, and all the time they is searching for sleeping people. Can you see them? Sophie asked. Never at first. Then how do you catch them if you can't see them? Sophie asked. Aha, said the BFG. Now he is getting on to the dark and dusky secrets. I won't tell a soul. I is trusting you, the BFG said. He closed his eyes and sat quite still for a moment while Sophie waited. A dream, he said. As it goes whiffling through the night air, it is making a tiny little buzzing humming noise. But this little buzzy hum is so silvery soft, it is impossible for a human being to be hearing it. Can you hear it? Sophie asked. The BFG pointed up at his enormous truck wheel ears, which he now began to move in and out. He performed this exercise proudly, with a little proud smile on his face. Is you seeing these? He asked. How could I miss them? Sophie said. They maybe is looking a bit preposterous to you, the BFG said, but you must believe me when I say they is very extra usual ears indeed. They is not to be coughed at. I'm quite sure they're not, Sophie said. They is allowing me to hear absolutely every single twiddly little thing. You mean you can hear things I can't hear? Sophie said. You is deaf as a dumpling compared with me, cried the BFG. You is only hearing thumping loud noises with those little earwigs of yours, but I am hearing all the secret whisperings of the world. Stop it. Luna's being naughty. Stop it. I am hearing all the secret whisperings of the world. Such as what? Sophie asked. In your country, he said, I is hearing the footsteps of a ladybird as she goes walking across a leaf. Honestly, Sophie said, beginning to be impressed. What's more, I is hearing those footsteps very loud, the BFG said. When a ladybird is walking across a leaf, I is hearing her feet going clumpety, clumpety, clump like giant's footsteps. Good gracious me, Sophie said. What else can you hear? I is hearing little ants chittering to each other as they scuttle around in the soil. You mean you can hear ants talking? Every single word, the BFG said, although I is not exactly understanding their language. Go on, Sophie said. Sometimes on a very clear night, the BFG said, and if I is squiggling my ears in the right direction, and here he swiveled his great ears upwards so they were facing the ceiling. If I is squiggling them like this, and the night is very clear, I is sometimes hearing faraway music coming from the stars in the sky. A queer little shiver passed through Sophie's body. She sat very quiet, waiting for more. My ears is what told me you was watching me out of your window last night, the BFG said. But I didn't make a sound. I was hearing your heart beating across the road, the BFG said, loud as a drum. Go on, Sophie said. Please. I can hear plants and trees. Do they talk? Sophie asked. He is not exactly talking, the BFG said, but they is making noises. For instance, if I came along and I is picking up a lovely flower, if I is twisting the stem of the flower till it breaks, then the plant is screaming. I can hear it screaming and screaming very clear. You don't mean it, Sophie cried. How awful. It is screaming just like you would be screaming if someone was twisting your arm right off. Is that really true? Sophie asked. You think I is swissfiggling you? It is rather hard to believe. Then I is stopping there, said the BFG sharply. I is not wishing to be called a fibster. Oh no, I'm not calling you anything, Sophie cried. I believe you, I really do. Please go on. The BFG gave... Stop it. Stop it. The BFG gave her a long, hard stare. Sophie looked right back at him, her face open to his. I believe you, she said softly. She had offended him. She could see that. I would never ever be fibbing to you, he said. I know you wouldn't, Sophie said, but you must understand that it isn't easy to believe such amazing things straight away. I understand that, the BFG said. So do please forgive me and go on, she said. He waited a little while longer, and then he said, It is the same with trees as it is with flowers. If I is chopping an axe into the trunk of a big tree, I is hearing a terrible sound coming from inside the heart of the tree. What sort of sound? Sophie asked. A soft, moaning sound, the BFG said. It is the same. It is like the sound of an old man is making when he is dying slowly. He paused. The cave was very silent. Trees is living and growing just like you and me, he said. They is alive. So is plants. He was sitting very straight in his chair now, his hands clasped tightly together in front of him. His face was bright, his eyes round and bright as 2 stars. Such wonderful and terrible sounds I is hearing, he said. Some of them you would never wish to be hearing yourself. But some is like glorious music. He seemed to be almost transfigured by the excitement of his thoughts. His face was beautiful in its blaze of emotions. Tell me some more about them, Sophie said quietly. You just ought to be hearing the little mices talking, he said. Little mices is always talking to each other, and I is hearing them as loud as my own voice. What do they say? Sophie asked. Only the mices know that, he said. Spiders is also talking a great deal. You might not be thinking it, but spiders is the most tremendous natterboxes. And when they is spinning their webs, they is singing all the time. They is singing sweeter than a nightingale. What else do you hear? Sophie asked. One of the biggest chat bags is the caterpillars, the BFG said. And what do they say? They is arguing all the time about who is going to be the prettiest butterfly. That is all he is ever talking about. Is there a dream floating around here now? Sophie asked. The BFG moved his ears this way and that way, listening intently. He shook his head. There is no dream in here, he said, except in the bottles. I has a special place to go for catching dreams. They is not often coming to giant country. How do you catch them? The same way you was catching butterflies, the BFG said, with a net. He stood up and crossed over to a corner of the cave where a pole was leaning against the wall. The pole was about 30 feet long and there was a net on the end of it. Here is the dream catcher, he said, grasping the pole in one hand. Every morning I is going out and snitching new dreams to put in my bottles. Suddenly, he seemed to lose interest in the conversation. I is getting hungry. It is time for eats. And we're going to stop there for today. So what I'd like you to do today, guys, is I'd like you to write a description of what the BFG looks like. Now, we've just learned a little bit more about the power of his ears, haven't we? So I want to use the picture and what we know about the BFG and write a description of what he looks like. But in your description, I want you to include the things that we've learned this week. So we've learned about similes. So I'd like you to try and include at least one simile. I'd like you to include a list sentence with commas in it, just like we did on Wednesday. And I'd like you to try and include a conjunction or two so that we've got different types of sentences in our description. Okay, I'm going to show you mine, and then if you want to steal any of my ideas, then you can. If you want to steal mine and change a little bit, you can. But if you want to write your own completely, then you can. All right, so here's mine. When Sophie first saw the BFG, she was terrified. He is as tall as a building and moves completely silently like a shadow. He has small, black, beady eyes and a long, hooked nose. Huge, round ears sit on the side of his face that are as big as bin lids. He wiggles them around when he wants to hear something far away. Would you believe he can hear a ladybird crawling along a leaf? Even though the BFG is huge and strong, he is very kind. He wouldn't hurt Sophie because he is a big, friendly giant. So I've written quite a short description. Yours will probably be longer than mine, all right? But in mine, let's see if we can find any similes. I can see a simile, here, as tall as a building. So I'm saying he's like a building. And I also said that he moves silently like a shadow. So there's another simile, all right? And I also wrote one about his ears, didn't I? As big as bin lids. Okay, so I used 3 similes in mine. Let's look and see if I've used any list sentences where we've got 2 or 3 adjectives next to each other. Here, look. He has small, black, beady eyes with commas in between. Oh, here's another one, look. A long, hooked nose. So long and hooked are 2 adjectives, so we need a comma in between. Oh, here's another one, look. Huge, round ears. So we've got huge and round, 2 adjectives, and we need a comma in between. Okay, so we've got quite a few. Oh, there's one here as well, look. Big, friendly giant. Big and friendly are 2 adjectives, so we need a comma in between. All right. And have we used any of our conjunctions, if or after or because or when or as? Let's have a look. Oh, look, he wiggles them around when, but let's use a different color. When he wants to hear something. So we used a when. And oh, look down here. He wouldn't hurt Sophie because he is a big friendly giant. So I used 2 conjunctions as well. Do you know what as well? Just spotted. Now, I didn't do this on purpose, but I also, today, used an exclamation mark, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago. We used a question mark, which we talked about. And I also used a contraction. Look, I used wouldn't instead of would not. So I've used loads of different things that we've used over the last few weeks. I'd like you to have a go at writing a description of what the BFG looks like. I've got a picture here. If you want to find some different pictures of the BFG on the internet, that's fine. If you want to print them off and stick them in your book, that's fine too. And actually, you might want to, if you want to, write your description and then underneath, do a huge picture of the BFG as well. You can copy this one if you want to, all right? So I want you to spend probably about 30 minutes, quite a long time writing today, and see if we can include all of those different things. Good luck, and I'm really looking forward to reading your writing today. And I will see you on Monday, and on Monday, it'll be February already. Wow. Okay, see you later, Year 2. Have a lovely weekend.